Okay, we're live. I'm here with my guest, Brian. I'm going to have Brian introduce himself, and then we're going to talk all things basketball and training. So, Brian, the floor is yours, my friend.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to it. My name is Brian McGill. I'm a performance trainer originally from Portland, Oregon. I've been in Boston for about 3, 4 months full time now. I have experience working with athletes of all ages from all sports, a little mostly basketball for the most part, general population, just adults with goals, baseball, football, hockey, Olympic sports as well. Um, Connected here because I moved out to the East Coast with a client that plays for the Celtics named Peyton Pritchard full time, where I'm staying with my girlfriend and soon to be fiance, and that's how we connected through the ladies in our lives. And yeah, for the most part, I've been doing this for about 4 to 5 years now. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, playing basketball. Went to school at a Division II school in Alaska, played there, made minimum wage, probably 900 euros a month to play basketball professionally, quote unquote, in Berlin, Germany for a year. Took a couple of years at that point, and like many people that go into the strength conditioning field, considered PT school for a bit. I started looking at different DPT programs, ultimately decided to go the coaching and private sector route. And here we are a few years later.
Yeah, so shout out to the ladies in our lives for connecting us. Our better halves are always looking out for us, right?
Absolutely.
So I am really interested in like everything you have to talk about basketball. Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
more in the baseball setting myself. I don't have a lot of connections to the basketball world. But those guys are all freak athletes, man, and they're big and they move well and they're fast and they're explosive and they can run for days. And so, really, just talk to me about kind of your influences, how you got connected with Peyton, and then just kind of like what your business looks like on a day to day. And then
Yeah.
we'll kind of dive into the training.
Absolutely. So basketball is so fascinating just because there are so many variables that allow an athlete to be successful. You talk about, especially at the highest of levels, we just see the freaks of natures. And some of those guys are probably right up there with some of the guys in the NFL as the best athletes maybe on the planet. Within that, it just continues to be layered. Peyton, for example, is a 6'1", pretty averagely athletic as far as professional athletes go speaking guy that weighs about 195 pounds. He had like a 27 standing inch vertical jump, which is not the greatest for NBA standards for his position. And so for him, we can make the decision like, hey, do we just want to like do a whole bunch of like maximal force output stuff, get you as explosive, as fast, as strong as possible? Or should we maybe explore some of those other athletic qualities that maybe aren't as sexy, maybe are a little bit more hard to quantify, that complement your game so much better to allow you to play with those freaks of freaks. Because if we add 5 to 6 inches to his vertical, that might add at best, it's a erroneous comparison, but like 2 to 3 points a game, maybe. It's not going to significantly change his ability to be a great NBA player. And if you look at what is self actualization in his career, what's the highest of levels he can get to, and we think about what that would look like for him, it's not adding a whole bunch of speed, strength, etc. It's not trying to emulate those freaks of nature that had an easier path to it. It's going the opposite way. And so for the high school kids that have more generalized needs because they have lower training ages or experiences, of course, we're spending a lot of time doing a lot of those explosive movements at younger ages and depending on what guys need. But for him specifically, he's the guy that I'm with full time now. So he's at the front of my mind when it comes to a lot of the training thoughts that I have going on. It's just been a really interesting journey to kind of accept a different path than the classic bigger, stronger, faster.
Is that commonplace in the NBA to have players with like their own guy or their own like maybe group of people that like coach them? They do the strength training. Is it like a blend of you're doing skill work because you played the game, or there's like somebody doing his skill stuff, you're doing the strength stuff? Like, what does that kind of look like with him and then within the NBA?
Yeah, for sure. Typically, so as you know, same as MLB, every organization has, and I'm really curious also to get your answer as well with this too, because I'm curious if
Mhm.
it mirrors. But every team has their strength staff, their athletic training staff, etc. They are with those guys for a majority of the season, if not the entire season. There are a few when you get to the top of the top, like the LeBron James, etc.s of the NBA. At that point in a career, a guy may want to bring in his own guy to be a little bit more specialized. there are also examples of a player that's with the Celtics now, Drew Holiday, when he was with a team called the New Orleans Pelicans. He was like a fringe all-star, like an all-star player, but not like a top 10 player in the league. And he also, just because of his basically the intent behind how detail oriented he was with his body, he had his guy come in full time. But typically, unless it's those guys, they're with their strength staff, with their team for the most part during the season. During the off seasons, obviously, I'm assuming it's the same with the Red Sox. Those guys are more than happy to offer support. If you want them at all your workouts, they will be there. They will fly out and visit you wherever you want to go vacation. But a lot of guys do tend to find someone in the private sector that they really gravitate towards. And I think the reason for it varies guy to guy. I know that I've had other players, not Peyton specifically, he's never said this, but other players in the NBA have told me that they like having their guy just because it is such a cutthroat business, and their strength coach is also helping the guy that's trying to take their spot and they're competing with for the next contract, wherever that may be. So I think there is a little bit of tribalism to it and just having your own individual teams within the league. Um, and then shoot, I think that's about is that kind of the same way that it goes in Major League Baseball?
Yeah, I would say so. In general, in baseball, every team has two strength coaches and a handful of athletic trainers, massage therapists, PTs. Some teams have three strength coaches. Most guys will follow the program from the strength coach during the season, and then in the off season, most guys will have their own. Very few guys want to live in Boston in the off season because obviously it's cold. They can go
Yeah,
somewhere where there's better weather. I have friends in other organizations who have like spring training facilities in Arizona, and a lot
yeah,
of guys live in Arizona, the nice weather, and they'll train at that facility in the off season. So really, I think it's very similar in the sense of the support is there in the off season, and then if the players want it, you pursue it with them. If they work with somebody separately, it's our responsibility to connect with those people.
absolutely.
So, for instance, if I'm in the NBA, I know Peyton is with you. It's my responsibility to connect the three of us and make sure we're on the same page for goals and we're in line with training, things like that. There are some guys that they don't have their own guy in the sense of like that person's not in the clubhouse, but they will still follow their program in this like during the season. And those guys, again, I just connect with them. They send me their program. We're on the phone pretty regularly, just making sure that our like I said, our goals are in line. The player is feeling good, and ultimately if I'm spending every day with that guy, I can give some insight to his off-season strength coach or in-season strength coach of like, this is what I'm seeing, maybe we should make these adjustments. But ultimately those players are putting a lot of their trust in their given private sector guy. I would imagine it's the same with you and Peyton. Like, he puts a lot of trust in you, I would imagine. And so there's really two ways you can do it. Like, I can be upset about it, I can be mad that he's not following my program, or I can just connect with him and show the player like, hey, I'm willing to help just get you better and get you where you want to go. It sounds like that's kind of how it is with you guys. I would say the one big difference in MLB is I don't think there's as much of that like tribal aspect that you're talking about in the NBA. And I don't know if it's because there's so few players on a team in the NBA, or like it's more individual one-on-one stuff. I really don't know what the difference would be there. Maybe we play more games. I don't know, whatever the case, but in the broad picture of it, yeah, it's a very similar setup. Probably not as intensive as this. Like, you're living in Boston full time. I'm sure you're on the phone with Peyton all the time. I'm sure you guys are connecting all the time. Like, it's probably a little bit more intertwined with you guys in the NBA just because the teams are a little smaller.
Yeah.
But similar general concept, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things as the representative in the conversation from the private sector is being able to have some of those conversations with the NBA strength coaches. Cause obviously when you get to those levels, those coaches a lot of times are the best of the best. So that's been unbelievable for us. But 100%. And then just going back to the original question on the almost the hybrid of the basketball with that. So I've been a basketball coach at the high school level, very good high school team, I guess, for what it's worth. Like, we have a lot of guys that have played there that are playing Division 1 sports, a lot of playing basketball, some NBA prospects. And so that has allowed me to be for lack of a better word, kind of taking care of both buckets with the training. With Peyton specifically, though, I'm more of a consultant for those on-sport skills workouts. It's not exactly my programming. I'm not writing down how many shots he's taking from which spots, where he's playing one-on-one. I'm just giving my thoughts unfiltered, and then it's kind of just a conversation. And ultimately, he's the one that's making those final decisions. He does have a few skills trainers as well that he loves to work with in Los Angeles primarily. So whenever he's out there or wherever within a driving distance that's reasonable to go visit those guys, that's always happening, and trips are planned that around that as well. It is really cool though, and it's been a little bit different. Like when you are with a guy as much as I am, I'm starting to take on more roles than just only the training stuff. So, for example, if we're spending time in Cape Cod, where he just purchased an off-season house, like right now we're like designing the basement weight room, which has been a really fun experience with the discount we get from Rogue through his agency. I'm organizing different guys to come in that are going to come play pickup or come play one-on-one or come train with us for the week, just for an added stimulus of a different type of body and live competition, or for the energy that they're bringing to the training environment, which is something that we're really carefully curating during the summers, just for getting as much out of it as we can and having great peace of mind and all that stuff. So that's been really, really fun. I've also found that I just learned so much more about the game by kind of taking the responsibility to make sure I know what the heck is going on and staying consistent with that. It was kind of interesting the way that as I transitioned into strength conditioning, I spent less time and energy focusing on basketball. I probably even watched the sport less while I was actively trying to specialize with those athletes, apart from the high school coaching. And now I've reverted more. I'm watching a ton more NBA games. I'm studying the movements of different guys differently on the court, getting into some of the analytic data that those guys have access to about their outputs throughout the game, throughout the season, et cetera. Monitoring like the recovery, the HRV stuff throughout this season that I've never really been paying attention to in the past. So it's been a really, really cool experience, and I'm eager to continue getting a lot better and learning a lot more as I go with the process.
Yeah, it's very similar for baseball for me in the sense like I played in a little bit of Division 3 college, nothing serious, but I was around the game enough growing up that I understood it. And then I got into strength and conditioning, and it was like very much like program design, X's and O's, like, weight room type of stuff. And now that I'm in the big leagues and baseball is kind of transitioning into like this performance outlook, looking at the metrics, looking at the data, really connecting like weight room protocols with like on-field performance. It's kind of looking at the game through like the baseball lens again, and like how does the training relate to and affect the actual game. And it kind of sounds very similar to what you're saying, and like being able to have that background of playing overseas, and then obviously I would imagine like being around a high level player in the NBA is opening your eyes to some things in the game that you would have never known. I have plenty of conversations about hitting and pitching with our guys that I'm like, I would have never thought of this, but now that I'm having this really intelligent and like, highly thought out conversation with these players, I'm like, well, this gives me a new idea for training based on what you're saying. Like maybe we can make this work. Is that kind of similar to your path with basketball?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are some things just as a player, I remember in college specifically, and my college strength coach was unbelievable and a mentor and a big reason that I wanted to go in the field. But like I'm squatting like 345, 365, like my outputs are going up. And then I'm finding myself in positions on the court, and I'm like, hey, like I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel balanced here. I don't feel as if I'm able to express my skill in these positions. And so, like, for an easy example would be a lot of guys don't spend a lot of time apart from what's actually happening in competition doing any type of like curvilinear running. That's a pretty easy. In baseball, I'm sure that's much different because there's base running, et cetera. Like that's an ingrained skill. In basketball, we do it obviously all the time. Very rarely are we traveling linearly in a straight direction, but the movements are so varied that it can be challenging to incorporate things that will help with that in training. There's also Bobby Stroop out of Apex, like the Patrick Mahomes trainer. He talks a lot about some of that three-dimensional training and getting away from, not away from, but in addition to the three planes of motion that everyone's trying to program within. is being able to train within 3 degrees of motion and being able to not only find coordination in new movement patterns that are foreign and unfamiliar to us, but being able to find strength, mobility, eventually power, etc., in all of those positions. And it's kind of the Pandora's box of training because it's a little bit challenging for me to make sure that what I'm doing is not challenging, but you have to consistently like look in the mirror, like, is this training, does this still have a purpose? Are we still moving toward the end goal? And then making sure you don't get lost in the land of just kind of creating exercises that maybe don't have the transfer the benefit that you want. Um, but no, absolutely, it's been pretty crazy. And then even on the social emotional side too, like a big thing for me that I had from my mentor when I was in high school that changed my life, and I'm like, hey, I want to do this for other people, is just being able to help them as a resource, whether that's just an ear to vent to, how to give advice on how to deal with a difficult relationship with a coach, trainer, teammate, whoever that may be, and the struggles and new challenges and obstacles that come with the NBA lifestyle, with the amount of money that's in it, with the amount of politics that go into quite literally almost every decision, the heightened stakes, pressure internally, externally, etc. That's also been another really, really big one for me. And as you know, the body sometimes doesn't really differentiate between stressors. So it's super important to kind of stay on top of that stuff as far as our recovery goes and in regards to our programming, which is just, as I said, I don't want to come across like a dumb guy, but it obviously goes so vast that it's been really, really exciting to kind of have these new opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I was literally just having this conversation on my drive home today with somebody. I called one of my buddies and I was like, I'm really thinking about some of these positions that we get into in baseball, obviously, specifically for me. And I would assume it's the same in basketball for you. And like you're talking about, you're loading these squats up, but then you don't feel strong or explosive or athletic in these certain positions. And to me, I'm like, when guys are at the top of the game, whether it's in the big leagues or in the NBA or, NFL or whatever, like ultimately they have to feel comfortable enough to express their skill in these like unorthodox positions. And it's like, how do we make training look like that, but like you said, without making it look like just I made this fancy exercise to make this fancy exercise. Like it actually has to have some carryover. And I want to say I saw on your Instagram, you had a post of like playing low, and I would assume it was Peyton like dribbling the ball in like a
Quite
certain
a bunch of the clips were
position.
from him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it made me think like, dude, there's like a lot of value in just doing some of these things. And like I was talking to somebody today, I'm like, if you want to learn how to like backhand a baseball, down the third base line, like you might have to just hold that position and just feel the ball hitting your glove and then back up and feel the ball that's hit a little harder. And you might have to hold that position for a long time and then just repetitions from there. And it's opening my viewpoint up a lot. Like you said, it's kind of like the Pandora's box, and it's like overwhelming but exciting. And I'm like, man, there's a lot of different ways I could go with this. But then I'm like, fuck, which way do I go? Right. Because I want what's best for the players. And it's so high stakes and so leverage. Like there's so much leverage, there's so much cutthroat to it that like one bad decision can cost, millions of dollars either to a team or to a player. And it's like, that's the kind of shit that you lose sleep over at night. And like, you don't always want to admit that, but it's like at the same time, that's kind of what, we go through. And I talked to my buddy, he does combine training, and he's like, that's like my competition window because I can make or break a guy with one decision. And he's like, I don't sleep for like 8 weeks in combine prep. And he's like, that's how I get my thrill in the private setting, is like I have to be on my game. And I'm like, dude, I totally get it. Like the competition aspect of things makes it like your decision making is that much more magnified, but at the same time, like, well, most of us like love that pressure. Like we really live to just feel that, right?
Yep. If I may, so I'll tell you off camera, just because we're finalizing the details, so I don't want to say specifics, but I'm gonna be doing pre-draft training in the Los Angeles area this spring in April and May for an agency, and we'll have about 10 guys in the draft class. They're going through that right now. It's kind of the same thing, just more opportunity to learn. But they're recruiting their current like rookie class right now, and I'm starting to have those conversations both with the agents, the players, etc. And it's like, hey, is this going to be a guy that's probably going to make 300-400 grand in Europe next year? And we don't really care about his numbers in the combine. We don't care about his numbers as far as the KPIs they chart in basketball for athleticism testing. Those are not a priority. Let's create a long-term athlete with a long-term training plan so he can have as great a rookie year in Europe next year as possible. Or could this guy jump 10 spots in the draft if he can show that he can jump a little bit higher or he can move a little bit better? And then that's going to be $5 to $8 million difference in his life. There are so many. Or is this guy super skilled and he's coming off a long season, heavy usage, heavy minutes? He's gonna go work out for probably every single one of these teams, maybe multiple times. A lot of times the NBA draft workouts can be grueling just because some of the admins and execs want to see how you respond to physical adversity, which is their prerogative, whether I agree with it or not. And we just have to make sure that we're not breaking down. We're in incredible we have an incredibly high level of endurance so we can make it through all of these grueling conditioning based shooting drills and perform as well as possible, because that's what's going to bump his draft stock. um it's Yeah, just to touch on it, but I'm really really excited. It's kind of the same thing like you said, and there's so much pressure. And then both with the pro guys, like you might have a guy that's just an established player with the Red Sox when you get there, like a Hall of Famer. There's the laundry list with Boston specifically. And you get there and you can help him, but maybe maybe you didn't impact his life or create as much change as the guy that you met in college or you coached in high school just because of when you cross paths. For these guys, I'm incredibly excited and making sure I'm getting my ducks in a row because I'm, for better or worse, their first point of contact along with some of the other coaches working with them. And so the opportunity to kind of like show them what it looks like. Of course, they could be the hardest workers in the room day one. I'm not casting any judgments on that, but it's an opportunity to lay the groundwork for what it means to be a professional athlete, how we approach the weight room, how we approach life, how we approach being on time to shit. That lifting is important and matters and will help you in your career and will help you make more money by being able to play longer. It's just a really cool opportunity and I'm excited for, and I had to start talking about it when you referenced that because it's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, no, that's like I said, we had a whole talk on the combine, and shout out to Justin on that one. And I could just tell, like, when we started talking about it and like the pressure he would feel, like his eyes lit up the same way your eyes are lighting up right now. And I'm like, he like fully thrives on this. Like, this is what he's, because he doesn't go to the games, you know what I mean? He's not
Yeah,
there all the
yeah,
time. And he's got some of our players in the off season and he sends them to us and I keep in touch with him, but ultimately once they come to us, like he's not in the trenches with them every day. So he's like, I
yeah.
need that competitive fire, and like that combine training is it for me. One of the
100%.
points you mentioned there with your players is like teaching them that the weight room is important. And one of the things that I've really heard along the way, and I don't know if this is true or not, this is why I'm asking you, is like a lot of basketball players tend to shy away from the weight room and are much more just like out on the court practicing and playing and doing pickup games and things like that. Like, is that still the culture? Has the culture changed? Like, is it like a losing battle to try to like address you need to be in the weight room, or is it just finding creative ways for them to train that aren't like traditional strength training?
100%. Um, that the stereotype is grounded in reality. It is definitely a case by case basis. Different guys find it at different times for different reasons or don't find it. It could be they need it for their game. They have an injury, which teaches them about their body, the rehab process. Now it's a thing. They have tendonitis in year 10 randomly. Now they find the weight room, or they just make it their entire career, never finding it. I think social media, to be honest, for better or worse, has been a huge factor within that because guys love to see what other guys are doing, even if they're not going to take it. They don't. They want to know though, and now you see everyone in the weight room because they want to post it on Instagram, and it kind of is just like I think giving everyone else FOMO, and so it's spreading quickly. I think it's also really interesting just basketball. This is a conversation for another day, but basketball strength conditioning, the evolution of it, I think a lot of sports started with the bigger, faster, stronger NCAA Nebraska football program. and then kind of evolved and branched off. And I think there's a lot of parallels in baseball and basketball and the directions we need to go. Um, but with the weight room stuff and the buy-in specifically, a lot of coaches get annoyed about it, but I've just chosen to take the complete opposite viewpoint and try to embrace the challenge of getting them to buy in. Because if my job is to provide value, it's my job to get them to buy in because that's the value I'm providing for them. And so for some guys, it's just cracking jokes. I have a client that is he's going to be the all-time leading scorer in EuroLeague, which is the highest level of basketball in Europe. And we joke all the time. Part of his workout is like 1A split squat, 1B complain that the weight is too heavy and that this is stupid and you don't want to body build. But that's okay. Like if he wants to complain, it's fine. It's funny. I know it's not real. And it's not a requirement to enjoy lifting if you still do it. Like I'm okay with you not liking it. We can gamify our warm-ups as much as possible. We can bring some novel stuff as far as like incorporating animal flows or different kinds of things into our mobility sections. We can do a lot of things where we'll throw on a VBT unit just to let you compete with yourself for some of the strength training work, just as and compete with others as well, just as a novel stimulus to create buy-in. Or I can bring the TV out from your house into the weight room, and then we can go watch your step back and see how it looks exactly like a lunge. Be like, damn, bro, that's pretty explosive. Like, you see how your knees going out in that direction? Like, think about how much force you're putting in to that area. Doesn't it make sense that maybe we should kind of support that by making some of those muscles around it strong so we can tolerate those loads and forces over a 9-month season that you always complain is so freaking long every year? And then once you start to do it and just have some rapport with them and a good approach to it, it becomes fun. Then you get the buy-in, then you did your job and it feels really, really good and ultimately serves them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of strength and conditioning coaches that came through that bigger, faster, stronger, and like the traditional, I'll just squat, deadlift, bench, you'll get strong, and then the game will take care of itself. You'll get better. But I think nowadays, I mean, speaking from my own experience in the big leagues, you may have somebody that's pushing 40 who's been in the big leagues for 10 plus years, and you may have somebody who's as green as they come and they're in their early 20s and they need different training, right? And so if all I'm doing is, hey, you're squatting, you're benching, you're deadlifting, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. And I think training looks different for everybody. And I think if you were to come in a weight room in the baseball setting, you'd see a lot of different things going on, but you would see a lot of people there. And I think that's kind of the number one thing is like, if there's a lot of people in the weight room, like something is right in that place, whether it's the environment, whether it's the actual training programs, you have buy-in when there's a lot of people in that weight room. And I personally have had a lot of success just finding what makes guys tick, finding what they like and finding what they need. And then, like you said, just relating it to like the actual on-field skill. Like, look at this is something you're dumping your back hip. Like this exercise can help you with this. Like, let me show you this. And then they have results. And then all of a sudden they're more bought in. And then they tell their friend, like, no, 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 it's not all just, meathead
Yeah.
bodybuilding stuff. It's some of these other things. And then their friend comes in and then you find what works for them. And then before you know it, the whole team is in there, but they're doing different things, but it's helping them. Like I said, I think
Yeah.
the higher you go, the more special you have to look into certain things. And really just make the training about them. And sometimes it is the same program for multiple people, and it's making them feel unique within that program. Like, man, this like split squat going to be beneficial for a number of different reasons. It might provide stability, it might build muscle mass, it might, be able to sprint better if you're doing it. But like that same exercise can be explained three different ways to three different people, and they can all benefit
100%.
from it.
Yeah.
And they're all like, oh, this is just for me, but why is he doing it? Well, because it also provides this. Well, could it help me with that too? Yeah, of course. Like there's not just one reason. But again, I think that goes a long way with buy-in, especially with professional athletes that have so much on the line. And then on the other side of that, like obviously you have Peyton that you're working with, but you have high school kids as well. You have general population. Like how does having him in your corner like help benefit you with those people, whether it's like ideas you're taking from that training, or even just a reputation you've built, or you know, like being able to differentiate of like, this is where you're at, this is where you could get, but this is what this guy's doing as a pro, like, and you're only doing this as a, you know, a young kid, like this is your journey, you know what I mean? Like, how does that help you in your business?
For sure. So I guess from a marketing standpoint, like have had and continue to have at times these conversations with him just about the obvious elephant in the room that me working with him and sharing that to others helps my business, gives me legitimacy, makes people want to be around me and work with me. Having that conversation was amazing because it kind of relieved any kind of anxiety I have around that, because that's something I feel uncomfortable with a lot of the time, is like trying to too closely attach myself to my clients because those are their successes and their successes alone. With that being said, though, it absolutely has helped a ton, particularly when I was in Oregon. I take that back. I'm maybe working with around 10 kids right now in Boston, but he's pretty well known out here too, but definitely back home in Oregon. And then specific to him too, like he's a guy that has a lot of physical tools, but compared to the average NBA player, does not really have a lot of physical tools. So I can tell like, hey fellas, like I know the blueprint. We know what will work. We know the level of effort required. We know the hours required. We know what it takes. It's not a secret. If it works for him, it can work for other people too. And it's not like I'm training Zion Williamson, who's a genetic freak, or LeBron James. Like, hey, do what LeBron did, but I'm not going to be 6'9", 280 with a 40-inch vertical. Yeah, fair point. So that's been unbelievable. I would say it's probably helped a lot more with just the marketing stuff, and then also the basketball. I think being around him and his basketball mind, and he really is a basketball genius. Like professional athletes are geniuses in one way or another, and I think being around him and being able to see the game the way that he sees it to a large degree has helped me understand the game significantly better and be able to bring some of those smaller tidbits to players playing at the high school college level. I think that's super beneficial. There's some stuff, and like for example, we but he created a ball handling routine last summer, and he was coming off an issue with his foot, like some plantar fasciitis stuff, some lingering like Achilles tendinopathy, like just nothing too crazy. But I was like, hey, dude, you have not been doing your ball handling drills lately. This is like daily hygiene for your skill development. You've gotten away from it. Let's reincorporate it. It might have been him that said that. We start doing that. Like, hey, actually, when you're just going through the legs in this lunge position right here, can I just put your front foot up on a slant board and just keep your heel in the air and stay right there? And so now he's in like a soleus calf hold lunge position. We're loading his tendons at the same time. We're loading his Achilles. We're loading the patella. And we're spending a minute down there because he's doing all his ball handling for that extended a period of time. So now all of a sudden we're hitting multiple buckets as far as some of like the little corrective things that we want to work on, strengthening the calf, whatever, etc. Then the next one, it's a slightly different exercise, and we just have him with like a mini band big toe smash. And basically just the idea being reinforce his tripod foot, the band will recoil if he's not keeping that point of contact. And then the ball is, in fancier terms, creating perturbation that he's having to stabilize through a tripod foot through. And this is once again all him, then same thing. He's doing some balance dribbling down in a hinged position, almost in like a single leg RDL isometric hold type of position. Just all kinds of different isometric loading that we've introduced a little bit of stability work through the perturbation. Maybe it's not optimal if our only goal is to load the tendon, or our only goal is to create perturbation, or our only goal is X, Y, or Z. But now he has a warm up that he looks forward to every day. That's checking the skill development bucket for that area, and we're also accomplishing our goal for the strength training stuff. And then isometrics end up being a phenomenal warm up for strength training, depending on what your body needs and wants. And that'll just be another example of it. And kind of getting, it made me really excited because you can tell he's like buying into the process and like coming up with his own shit. And like, yeah, it's a little bit novel and new, but there's also extreme legitimacy behind it. And it's nothing that's not, there's nothing not beneficial within that.
Yeah, I think the point you make about like professional athletes being geniuses, like for me, I know we've hit on it already, but like having those conversations with them about the game and how they view the game and the lens that they see it through, and making that training almost collaborative of like, I'm going to take some of my strength and conditioning expertise and tell you if this is like absolute eyewash or not. And then you kind of put your own flair of the game on it. And like you say, you talk about like the lunge positions, the dribbling, and like there's all legitimate science and strength and conditioning principles to support it. And then he puts his own flair on it, right? And like the two of those combined create something that's unique to him, right? And I think that's ultimately within the grind of a long professional season is like finding things that guys are willing to do. And I know you said daily hygiene for like your skill development. Like for me, that's kind of what it is as well, is like creating a routine that you look forward to doing, that is going to get you going, and it's going to help push you forward as a player, even if it's in really small doses. Those little doses over time tend to add up. And the way I look at it is like if the routine takes you 5 minutes and you do that 5 minutes every day, like you either do or you don't. And you either get 5 minutes closer to your goal or you're 5 minutes further away. And like it's a very simple black and white. You either did it or you didn't. Not, I don't care about the excuses like, oh, I didn't have the time today. Totally get it. That's fine. But it comes to a point where, like you said, whether it was him or whether it was you, one of you brought up like, hey, you haven't been doing these ball handling drills, and you're like, shit, I need to get back to those. And then you just pick up where you left off. And for us, that's a major goal, is just because we play every day, because we see each other every day, like finding things that just work for that person and making them, I don't want to say flexible enough. Maybe that's the right word.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not, but
Yeah.
just making it within this bandwidth of like, it's not eyewash. There is like something beneficial coming out of this, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like you still feel good doing it. I don't want to go completely like off the reservation and doing these outrageous things just because you like them, but there's no real benefit to them other than you
Yeah.
like them. Like
Yeah.
that, to me, that's just superstition. Like there has to be some
Yeah.
sort of like, yes, we're doing this because of that. But once you start doing it, like all of a sudden it adds up. And then they're like, hey, do you think this would work? And then it becomes collaborative. And then boom, you just take off with it. So it's really personally,
100%.
it's fun for me to spend as much time as I do around highly skilled and highly successful baseball players, because I have those conversations all the time, whether it's, like formally sitting down in a Zoom or informally in the dugout. Like, hey, did you see that? Like, yeah, I did. What do you think about that? Like, yeah, my first move wasn't great, this, that. And it's like they pull the iPad out and it's collaboration. And then you talking with the hitting coaches, the other skill coaches. Like it sounds like it's a very similar process for you. And ultimately it does sound like it's very rewarding, I would think.
Oh, 100%. It's the most fun in the world. It
Yeah,
really is.
yeah, and you add the pressure in and like the high stakes, and then it's like, all right, now we're really like we're going somewhere with this.
It's interesting, man. I think baseball might be correct me if I'm wrong, but it could potentially be a slightly easier sport to quantify statistically success or failure than basketball.
I think
Um,
so, yeah.
and obviously the numbers are not going to tell the entire story or far from it, but it's just really interesting because I was even just thinking about the combine training. It's like, okay, what are the KPIs that we really care about? Like, how am I going to tell if I'm successful? Or even with Peyton, like, how am I going to tell if I'm having success? I don't have an admin. I'm in the private sector. I don't have a boss right now, apart from my clients. But like, how am I measuring success apart from like charting the weights we're progressively overloading, whatever test we want to do? The game is the ultimate KPI. Like, I don't give a shit about any number more than I do the game. Like, the numbers are just gonna give me confidence that the game will be affected. But if the KPI that matters is the game, then ultimately everything I'm doing is somewhat subjective, and I'm never gonna be able to fully quantify my success or failure by that metric. And then I'm just like thinking about it as if it's like the nature of the universe or something for a second. And that's also just been something that I'm having to kind of like wrestle with or be at peace with and find confidence in with, because it is so, it's just so variable, the impact that you're having. And I even tell guys with like the injury prevention stuff, like you could get really, really strong and something could still happen. Like that's going to be the case. Or you could do none of this and nothing might happen. That could also be the case. Or you could do this, and if nothing happened, we'll never know if that's because you were lifting and that prevented the potential injury, or if it you just never found yourself in a position to be injured. Like, but let's check every box we possibly can. Um, Little bit of a long-winded kind of just tangent there, but it's just really, really interesting for me to think about some of those things as well too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's something that you're not alone in that, right? Like I have personally been wrestling this as well, and again, I've been having a lot of these conversations lately because that's kind of where baseball is going, and it's like, maybe specifically in our game, like some of the metrics that you can really influence are probably like exit velo on the hitting side and throwing velo on the pitching side. But even if you do increase velocity on either of those, you're not guaranteeing success. And maybe the guy has more success, but maybe he doesn't. And maybe you have a plan of attack that you think is great and it doesn't work out and you go back to the drawing board. And I think for me, I've always tried to hang my hat on just when I come in that day, I am making decisions to try to put this player in the best possible position to succeed with the knowledge that I have right now. I don't know what I know, 2 years from now. And I've had players. I have one specific player who I'm very close with, who I told him, I'm like, listen, at the time I told you something, I thought it was the right decision, and I've learned since, and now I'm telling you, don't listen to what I said because I've learned that I was wrong, and at the time I thought I was right, and at the time I thought it was the best thing for you, and I'm telling you now, like wholeheartedly, I'm sorry first and foremost that I put you in the wrong position, but I just didn't know what I didn't know, and now I'm more educated, and hopefully I can put you in a better position to succeed. And he was like, "No, it's cool. Like I appreciate you being honest with me, and I know that you have my best interest at heart." And for somebody like yourself, you say you don't have a boss, and really like your success as a businessman is if clients stick around, right? And what does that mean is like one client might stick around because you get them results. One client might stick around because they really just need somebody to motivate them. One client might love your personality. One client might think you're good looking and want you to, just want to look at you more
yeah,
often. Like there's a number of reasons why people stick around. And ultimately like that's the success of your business, but like the success of you as a person and like what you attach to is like, well, of course I want Peyton and my other clients to do as well as they can. And like that's what you lose sleep over. Not necessarily like, how am I going to keep this client here? Because I think the work speaks for itself, right? Like obviously you're educated, obviously you give a shit, obviously like, you're putting good content out, you know what you're talking about. Like people are going to come to you because you're a good person and you do good work. It's more so the like, I don't want to just be good. I want to be great and I want my clients to be great and I want them to feel great and be successful in whatever they choose. And it's like, that's like I said earlier, that's the shit that I lose sleep over at night is like, how can I help this pitcher? If a guy's on a 5-day routine in baseball specifically, like he doesn't pitch well, like I lose sleep over that. I'm like, fuck, I want to help this guy so that the next outing he goes out and he dominates. And like it eats me up because I want him to be
yeah,
successful. And it could be I did everything possible and it was raining that day and he couldn't feel the ball in his fingers. And so he was walking
yeah.
guys. And I'm like, I can't control the weather. I'd love to if I could, but like
Like why didn't I throw some gloves on him and just like increase the
right, exactly.
and
So
all
it's
the
like
what's the
we
word, receptors,
yeah, we have to
sensory
like
feedback.
we have to almost like we want to save the world as strength and conditioning
Yeah,
coaches, and we think that we can do so much and we're really only limited to certain things. And it's like a philosophical deep life thought of like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to find this answer. And I don't know, like, but I'm always on the pursuit of it. Right. And it's like, part of me is like, if I'm never going to get to that answer, why am I bothering like losing sleep over this? And then part of me is like, fuck that. I am going to find the answer somehow. Right. Like,
hell
I
yeah,
will turn over every stone to get
hundred
there.
percent,
And I,
hundred
I
percent.
think a lot of people in our kind of settings and like especially the higher stakes you go, I think a lot of people feel similarly to that.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. And even like last summer, man, he was coming off a rookie tenure. Shouldn't count other people's money, but like he was coming off a first round NBA rookie contract. He's in the fourth year of it now. He just signed an extension back in September for the next 4 years for a lot more money. But even going into it, we don't know, like, is he going to sign before the year? Is he going to play this thing out, bet on himself, see where the cards fall in the spring? Like, we'll see. But like, this is a money summer. Like the pressure for performance financially now is off. It's just because they're a really good team with a chance to win a title. But in my mind, all summer even, it's like, hey, like we better be ready to go. His body better be ready, like be able to maintain the season this year because we're getting paid at the end of it. Not we, but that's how you think. And it's not like not you think like I'm also getting paid, but like we're on this mission to make you as good as possible. And this is your opportunity to make a jump. We have to be ready. So that's really funny you say that because I feel the same way. I started to get a little tingly while you're speaking. But I saw a Kobe quote the other day, and he was just talking. I'm gonna butcher it completely, but he was just talking about the pursuit of excellence and just acknowledging that, like, yeah, I may never actually reach excellence. Perfection, excellence, one of the two. I may never actually reach that, but if you continue to pursue it in everything you do all the time, when you stop and look around, you're gonna be like, oh shit, like I'm I've gotten a lot farther than most other people because they make that decision that if I can never attain it, I'm just not going to pursue it that hard anyways. So I think to your point, the fact you're doing that means you're going to be far ahead of a lot of other people who are ultimately doing the right things. And then also something you said just about being able to admit when you're wrong. I think that's kind of the one of the things that's like served me definitely the best. Because if people look at my social media, it's always funny. I have like a couple thousand followers. But I have fun with it, and like I'm posting like just outrageous pictures with my girlfriend or doing whatever, or like just acting like someone I'm not. And then you meet me, and with the training stuff, a lot of the times, especially with the athletes I'm working with, I have next to no ego, and that's one of the first things I always tell them if they're a pro specifically is like this is a collaborative effort. You're a professional at doing what you do. That means you are the best, the best. We're working together as coworkers. The only thing I can guarantee is I'm going to do my very best with the information available. If I mess up, I'm gonna let you know. I will always say if I don't know something, I'll tell you in the moment. I don't know, but I'll go find out for you from someone smarter. And if I met, the only promise I can make is you're going to get my very, very best. And then there are times I can't think of specifics, unfortunately, but there are times when I'm like, hey, like I would do this different, or I messed this or that up. We're not going to do that again. And he's like, okay, that's no big deal. And I think just the vulnerability or the authenticity that comes with that goes such a long way. And I think that's a lot of the times with professional athletes in general. That's one of the multiple geniuses that many of them have is just being able to read people well. Like I think they can tell, especially after a while, they've reached that success level for a certain period of time. Their bullshit detectors are pretty freaking solid when it comes to a lot of stuff. And that definitely I found personally has gone a long way for me in the private sector.
Yeah, I would say same thing for me. Is just I think when they come through the ranks and they've been around so many people and there's money at stake and there's, they're obligated to do like media things and this, that, and all of the other things in between. Like they can tell when somebody is like just genuinely trying to help them, and they can tell when somebody's like trying to use them for whatever purpose it is, right? And I think, like you said, being authentic and just being open to like vulnerability around them is something that is rare. And so when they see that, they're like, oh, okay, like this guy just openly admitted he was wrong. And it takes a lot to do that. And I think when they come to you with something that you don't know, some people's first instinct is to try to explain it, and they make an ass of themselves, and then the guy comes to them and is like, hey, you were wrong, you told me the wrong thing. And they are like, all right, now all of a sudden, like, I don't know if I can trust this guy, not because he's smart or not smart, but because he tried to make something up to sound smart to me versus like, bro, I have no idea, never heard of it, but I'll look it
Mhm.
up for you, I'll let you know, and then follow up with them, right? Like, hey, I
Yeah.
looked at, whatever this training method was, it actually looks pretty cool. There's some probably some concepts we could probably take from that, or we're already doing this, but it's just called something different. Like, let me show
Yeah.
you what it is, right? Like, telling them that you don't know, being open with them, and then following up on it, I think goes a lot further than like getting caught in the moment with your pants down and like trying to make up some elaborate answer that they can Google and find out and be like, no, you were wrong. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And it's like, it takes a lot to build up that relationship with professional athletes. It takes almost no time to ruin that relationship with professional athletes.
I got an example for you. There is a client I have that's playing basketball in Spain right now. He's money's not important. He's probably making $500,000, so like pretty freaking high level player, and he's been doing it for about 8 years. He had a L4, L5 lumbar fusion surgery. I loaded him actually with an SSB squat safety squat bar, and we were just doing like a single, like it might have been a reverse lunge or something like that. Fortunately, it was not very heavy. Talked to a PT a few days later. It's like, hey, definitely stay away from actually loading people that have L4, L5 fusions. That's not going to be a great idea going forward. I don't know if there's different opinions on that in the PT community or anything else. Maybe if you have insight, you can give it. But I was like, oh shit. My immediate reaction, this is year one of me training. My immediate reaction, first professional client I've ever had, by the way, that's still with me, and that's my boy. Immediately tell him, like, hey, Drew, like, I fucked up, dude. Like, this was probably a horrible decision. Fortunately, you're okay. Just to point that out. We're never going to do that again. I've absolutely learned my lesson. I'm going to be very cautious going forward about how we do certain things. Also, note to you, don't actually load yourself when you're off doing whatever the heck you want to do. And let's just stay away from this until I give you further notice, okay? And he wasn't pissed at all. Like, with a lot of personality types, they don't really care. Like, oh, I could hurt myself, whatever. I can hurt myself anytime I like go play. Um, and in my mind, like my world ended and then restarted and was okay again. But even just stuff like that, man, I think really, really goes a long way because he's like, oh shit, I can tell that like he's acting like his dog died and everything's fine. And it's just another indicator, like, yeah, Brian probably does give a shit about my career.
Correct. Yeah, I would think two things there. Like, one, obviously you're connecting with PTs and like you're still trying to learn to help people, and like that is really, really important, especially with the professional athletes specifically. We talked about like they have kind of their team of people, right? And in any given setting, you have the PTs, the massage guys, the athletic trainers, the skill coaches, their media people. Like, there are so many people that can give you information on the personality, on the body, on the skill set, and like being able to lean on those and like help with your training is incredibly, incredibly important. And then the other thing I got a little chuckle out of is like, in our minds we're like thinking the world ended, and then they're just like, no, you're good, bro. And it's like, bro, I legit didn't sleep last night. I've said this story before to people. I had a one of the guys I'm closest with here. I had a major, major fight with my first year. I got really pissed off. I was motherfucking him about not doing conditioning, not taking his shit serious, and I lost sleep over it that night. I was like, I can't wait to get to the ballpark and tell him like that wasn't professional. We can go through this, better. And the next day I got there and I was like, man, I need to talk to you. Like, I'm really sorry about yesterday. Like, I fucked up. I should have been, more level headed with you. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, bro, are you serious? Like, we had a huge fight last night. And he's like, you thought we were fighting? And I'm like, are you kidding me? We were like yelling at each other. He's like, no, that's just how we talk to each other. And I'm like, are you serious? He's like, listen, moving forward, you're allowed to talk to me like that. Cause it's my first
Yeah,
year in the big leagues. I'm walking
100%.
on eggshells. I don't want to fuck things up. And he's like, listen, you don't have to talk like that with other people, but I don't care if you talk like that to me. And so now, if you walked into a room and you saw us talking to each other like that, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? Like, are they going to put each other through a table? But between the two of us, we're like, no, this is just how we get our points across to each other. So like,
Yeah.
it's really funny that like we really do care so much, and then they just like, I don't want to say they shit all over it, but they're just like, bro, it's okay. Like, It's all good.
More
I'm
or
fine.
less.
Yeah,
More or less.
you know what I mean? It's
No,
like,
for sure.
bro, I'm good. Like, but the thing is,
Yeah,
I think, like you said, if you didn't care, it would be way worse. They would be like, man, this guy just put me in like a really shitty spot. I could have lost a lot of money. I could have got hurt. I could have seriously fucked my life up. And he doesn't care. Like, why am I working with him? But because you care so much, they can joke with you. And then I think that's kind of like the ultimate sign of like, all right, we're cool. Is like if they joke with you, and like you said, like he's your boy, like, you know, clearly that went a long way. You know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah,
it's just such a funny dynamic. And being around those guys makes me laugh all the time. And seeing how really like human they are and how down to earth a lot of them are. So many of them are, and like I think people put them on pedestals because they're professional athletes when really like they're just a bunch of good dudes that are just
yeah,
happen to be really, really skilled at something. You know what I mean? You were a skilled
yeah,
basketball player, but you didn't make it to the league, right? But you're just another good dude that's out there.
yeah,
And like, I think that for me is the most rewarding part. Obviously, you see them succeed in their given sport and their livelihood and everything, but being able to see them be just dudes and like joke around with them and be like, man, you like, if I didn't know who you were, like I think you're just a funny ass dude. Like you make me laugh.
yeah,
Like we joke around, we have a good time. When it's time to get serious, we get serious. And then you take your craft really, you take it as hard as you can. You go as far as you can, and like you want to succeed, and you just happen to be really good at what you do. Like it's a very cool, very interesting world. And I appreciate you opening up and kind of just letting me see like a view into the basketball world. And before we shut this
absolutely.
down, is there anything else that we missed or you want to hit on, or any Kobe quotes to close us out on?
Shoot. No, we're gonna have to get coffee sometime, dude. I just want to talk to you about some more training stuff. I'm just really just curious. I saw a little thing you had on Instagram just about creating a kind of locked up athlete via bracing and loading through some probably the big three of lifting exercises. And then I'm doing a deep dive right now trying to understand some of the elastic, potential elastic qualities of the fascial lines and how that relates to like stored kinetic energy from the tendons and like plyometrics and how that may relate to baseball. And we're talking about power development in baseball. Like, what's the king? Is it force production? Is it quality of movement? Is it some of those rotational different fascial lines that play potentially? How are you incorporating those things in your training? Man, if you could choose one, are you going weight room movements or ballistic and plyo stuff for force production? I just want to talk again about the real like some intricate training stuff. I'm really curious about kind of where you guys are going in baseball. And no man, that's about it. I sincerely really, really enjoyed the conversation and let's do it again soon.
Yeah, me too. And one more time, shout out to our better halves for linking
Man,
us up.
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to our,
Absolutely.
our coffee and talking shop. And you're talking
Absolutely.
my language with that one. So we'll connect again soon, my
Absolutely.
man. Thank you and
Sounds
enjoy
good.
the holidays.
I appreciate it. You as well, Chris. Appreciate you.